I'm not really much of a carpenter, but I've built a house. I helped a guy build a house, and I've done a bunch of renovations, and I've been doing a bunch of work to my place. So I'm doing this handyman gig right now, and one of the things I got to do is try to refurbish some windows on some rental units. So in this video, I want to show you the solution that I've come up with for repairing old wooden windows that don't seem to be closing properly and that may be slightly rotten. I was told these windows were pretty rotten, but in pulling these apart, you know, and in inspecting them, they look like they're about maybe 96 to 92% good still. So this is me pulling the window apart, and they're really simple to come apart. There's little clips that you need to slide up on these arms here. There were little on the closing lever mechanism there. There were little tabs that just need to be slid out. You can do that by hand, and then the window itself slides down in the tracks, and then you can pull them out, slide them down, and then pull them out in the recess in the middle of the window. One of the problems that I found with the windows not closing properly was just the fact that the glass actually slid down in the window frame, which is what you can see in this image here. The other reason they weren't really closing all that great was the lever mechanism itself. The arms and the lever mechanism seem to be bent. So that's one thing that you have to do. That's one solution that I'm trying to come up with is finding a good way to possibly either bend the arms back. I was able to replace the mechanism with a spare one that we had in a window that was no longer being used. I was replacing some AC window units. So I was able to rob an old mechanism that wasn't able to be used in the one window that I've replaced so far. But in the second one that I've done, I'm going to end up having to probably bend the armatures, which I won't have in this video, but I think it's going to be pretty well straightforward. I think I'm just going to put the arms in a vise and then kind of bang them with a mallet, and then that should get them bent straighter. The other problem you'll have with the lever mechanism itself is that in the handle itself, it just seems to be completely wallered out, in which case you're going to have to replace that lever mechanism. But doing this little trick here that you'll see further on in the video where I router out the bottom of the frame is going to help significantly. Depending on how bad the window is, I will at least solve half the problem, if not more. But the other problem you're going to run into is though you might be able to get the window to close all the way, if it doesn't jam up, this part here where you can see the glass sliding down is gonna cause you your second problem, where the window is gonna bind up in the frame, just bending the lever mechanism back out again. So let's go a little further down this video. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. So the glass actually slides out, and what you can see here is the witness mark. Essentially, this is the silicone bead, and what you need to realize when you're replacing this silicone, which you'll see me doing further on in the video, I use DAP exterior, which is made with silicone for exterior use. I was criticized by some of the other carpenters. Some of the carpenters, I'm not a carpenter myself, I was criticized by some of the carpenters for using DAP. They said DAP is strictly interior. I made sure that the product that I was using was interior and exterior. It says right on the bottle. That's perfectly fine, but I just want to make that as a quick mention. Maybe you don't want to use that. Maybe you just want to use a strictly paintable. It's a good idea to use paintable if you're going to have to repaint the windows, so you don't have to be so careful about not painting the bead itself. So anyways, just want to make quick mention of that. But you can see the witness mark here, how the glass slides out of the top of the frame. And then as we see further on this video, this is the top of the frame, which is still fine, but the bottom starts to get a little rotten, and then this starts to separate on the bottom as well. So this part of the frame ends up sliding down, and then the glass slides down as well. So it all needs to be pounded back together, but you're going to see me doing a little bit of cleaning here. They had some weather stripping installed in the window to try to, you know, solve some of the draft issues. The problem with weather stripping is that it's not gonna seal properly, because on the top of the window it's still going to be close, and then in the bottom, so you would end up having to get a piece of tapered weather stripping, which doesn't exist, right? Because what's going to end up happening is it's going to be so tight in the top that it's not going to want to close, and then it's going to be loose in the bottom where you're going to need a really thick piece of weather stripping. So you would either need a tapered piece of weather stripping, or it just doesn't work. Or what they end up doing was they just ran the weather stripping halfway up, but that means in the middle area you're going to still have a spot where there's a gap where there's no weather stripping, but it's still got a bit of a gap. Anyways, I kind of beat that one to death, but you're going to see me doing a bit of sanding on here. One of the things that I need to do on the next window, I have a bunch of these windows that I need to do, is sand a bit more off the bottom of the window. Like I'm talking, maybe not a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch. I'm gonna have to sand quite a bit more, because what you're gonna see in a minute here, after I clean off some of this silicone and scrape some of the paint and do some sanding, is you're gonna see me banging the window back together. I take a piece of block, and this is right before I do that though. Actually, I show you a little bit of how I clean some of the paint off the window, the existing paint and silicone. Razor blade works really well. I actually learned this trick from masonry. When we are working in residential areas and we get some of our mortar on windows, actually razor blades work really great for cleaning mortar and sand and dirt and cement off of windows. They work really well. So here you can see me pounding the window back together. You're not going to want to hammer directly on the frame. Maybe if you got like a dead blow or a rubber mallet or something, it would be okay. I would still recommend using a block of wood. I would have even actually liked using a larger block of wood, maybe a 2x6 or a 2x8. You can see me after I pound it back together. And then I use some nails. I suppose you could use maybe just a pneumatic brad nailer. I just went and bought some finishing nails. These are a bit more substantial, a bit stronger. The wood on the bottom is slightly more weathered, slightly a little looser, softer. So I wanted to go with a bit more of a significant and stronger nail. So after I pound that back together, I nail these together. And then again, this is the part where you're probably going to want to take, I sanded the paint off the bottom at the very least and sanded, a little bit of the wood down. Maybe I took like a 1/16 of an inch off the most. You're going to probably want to take like 3/16 to a 1/4 of an inch off the bottom, so it does close easier. That's a pretty significant thing. That's a pretty important thing that I want to emphasize. So as you can see here, I'm nailing it back together. I didn't bother or having to remove the old nails because they were just kind of so loose and wallered out in there. When I pounded it back together, it's kind of weaker wood. One of the things I probably maybe would have liked to try to figure out is how to get some sort of wood glue in there. I probably should have pumped a little bit of wood glue into that joint before I pounded it back together as well. Now that I think about it, I'm going to do that on my next windows. So you can see me re-sealing the window pane itself. And I actually use this DAP, which I think is a great product. Again, I was criticized for using it, but I use it for everything. I use it for wood filler. I use it for block filler, for patching compound. So now I'm putting a straight edge on the window frame here because I'm actually going to have to router out the jamb where the mounting bracket for the lever mechanism sits. So part of the reason that these don't close all the way is because the window pane slid down, causing it to jam, and then people end up reefing on that handle, bending the lever mechanism. Now, if you can just replace the lever mechanism, that's a great way to go. You can also try to bend the lever mechanism back some. But also, one of the problems with the lever mechanism is it gets a bit wallered out. So unless you replace it, this is another path you can go down. If you have a router, I guess anyways. If you don't have a router, you're kind of screwed. But is just routering the area where the brackets sit so that they're deeper. So that essentially makes it so that the lever mechanism has to grab deeper, which will end up pulling the window back in further. I apologize if I explain that in the most convoluted way possible, but sometimes that's just how it goes in these videos. And for whatever reason, I felt like you guys needed to see the entire clip here of me routering this out, When something about routers you might want to know, there's a direction you want to generally go with your router. If you go one way, it's going to pull in towards your guide. And if you try to go the other direction, like if you try to go to your, I guess it would be left, it's actually going to push away, which you still can go that direction, but you're going to find that it's harder to keep against your guide because it's going to want to push away from your guide. Now I'm cleaning, and a brush is a great thing to have. Compressed air is also a great thing to have to clean your work space off, but a brush is a very important thing that I have all the time with me, especially even when I'm sanding on the house. I can brush things off. So now you're seeing me, because now that I've routed where these sat before, you can see here, so that these sit deeper, right? So that pulls the window in tighter. And now that I've routed this in deeper, I think it showed you in a bit ago there, where I have to use shallower screws, because if I use the original hardware, it would end up actually poking out of the front of the frame. And now that I'm using shallower screws in softer wood, more heavier weathered wood, I'm putting a little bit of wood glue on the back of these brackets just to keep them a little sturdier, just for a little added insurance. And I made marks where the brackets went, because you're no longer going to have witness marks when you take the bracket off. So I made marks on the frame where they went, but also you're still going to be able to see the existing holes to make sure that the spacing is correct on them. And you don't have, it's not that crucial. Isn't 100% important, because there is a little bit of wiggle room in the mounting bracketry itself.